Support comes from Thomas Nelson Community College, now becoming Virginia Peninsula Community College, the first choice to start a bachelor's degree since tuition is one-third the cost of four-year schools. More at tncc.edu.
Support comes from Hampton Roads Community Foundation, partnering with donors from all walks of life to improve southeastern Virginia through grants, scholarships, and leadership initiatives. Learn more at hamptonroadscf.org.
Hello, everyone. I'm Barbara Ham-Lee. It's a summer of political upheaval, both domestically and internationally. Despite warnings from China, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi visits Taiwan. President Biden announced the U.S. killed the leader of Al-Qaeda with a drone strike. How will these events affect national security? On the home front, the future of abortion rights now that the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade. What will happen in the 2022 midterm elections? And will former President Donald Trump run again in 2024? Political analysis with the award-winning Claville report. That's up next on Another View, right after this news from NPR and WHRO News.
Discussing today's topics from an African-American perspective, this is Another View.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Another View. I'm Barbara Ham-Lee. Just a quick announcement for you before we get into our discussion today. In partnership, the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health and First Baptist Church, Butte Street in Norfolk, are hosting an event this Saturday called the Dementia and Brain Health Workshop. Now, this will talk about dementia versus Alzheimer's symptoms and effects, planning ahead, and future care. And they need you to register. It is from 8 until 2 p.m. on this Saturday, the 6th of August. And to register, call 410-614-4908. That's 410-614-4908. And we hopefully you will take advantage of that workshop. Sounds like a lot of great information, especially if you have a loved one who may be suffering with dementia or Alzheimer's. So today we've got a lot going on the political front, and to make sense of it all, we are happy to have an Another View favorite with us today, Dr. Eric Claville. He's a political analyst. He's the director of the Center for African American Public Policy at Norfolk State University and special assistant to the president. And Eric, you are supposed to be sitting here in the studio, but the Hampton Roads traffic has had other thoughts today, huh?
Absolutely, Barbara.
Well,
but again, so glad to be with you.
And I really appreciate it. So, audience, Eric is actually literally driving here while he is talking to us, and hopefully we will see him in the studio in a very few minutes. But Eric, there's a lot going on. So I want to start with the international stuff that is happening, because we've got a lot going on politically. And I'm really curious about your perspectives, starting with the latest news that just came out that Brittany Griner, basketball star, has just been sentenced to 9 years in prison in Russia. Want to get your response.
Well, first of all, it's not surprising that she was sentenced to that time. And what we're seeing is that this is a move by Russia to further frustrate the United States and its international policy. So right now what we see, Barbara, is that they're utilizing its citizens against each other in order to play this game of international chess.
So do you think the Biden administration will still try does this mean negotiations are done in terms of they're trying to do a prisoner swap between Brittany and I'm sorry, the gentleman's name escapes me at the moment, but the other U.S. citizen that's being held in Russia right now?
Yeah, no. Negotiations are still going on. Mm-hmm. This is just simply another step toward reaching an amicable resolution. But again, I want our audience to understand, and we always keep it straight, with the audience on another view. What's been taking place, over in Eastern Europe, more specifically with Russia and Ukraine, one of the former Soviet blocs. It is escalating, and we see things that are happening over in Asia as well. I know we'll get to that in just a moment with the visit of Nancy Pelosi to Taiwan, which, of course, China also claims as part of its country, and they're recapturing it back. Of course, it was independent for a long time under British rule, but this is something that we're going to see is going to have major implications domestically very soon.
So speaking of Taiwan, so House Leader Nancy Pelosi, she went to Taiwan this week. Today, China has started their military exercises off the coast of Taiwan. What's going on with that? What do you think about this tension?
Well, let's just say they stoked the fire, and one thing that China is very adamant about. China is very adamant about challenging the United States as the sole superpower in the world. That is clear. President Xi, under his regime and under his vision, it is a China one policy and is a China dominant policy as well. So, some time back, you'll remember, I spoke about President Bush and former advisor Henry Kissinger when they were in China during the time of the Olympics, and how former President Bush talked about, China and the United States, we're going to have to work together. He was given a signal, to what was happening, the change in the world. And it's even more evident now on the military. Now, of course, economically, we see that. But on a military front, the United States has been lax in really, and this is my opinion and looking at, reports and studies, but we've really been lax in really fortifying our military across the world because we spent 2 decades in the Middle East, in Afghanistan, in Iraq. And there are varying opinions out there about those wars that we fought, whether we should have fought them or not. Of course, the evidence also proves that, they didn't have what they had, and, it ended up that way. But for the most part, we spent our military capital in those areas, and it's costly.
And so these strikes that China is engaged in right now, or the exercises they're engaged in right now, also could potentially bring in Japan and other countries. So, I mean, you've talked many times on this show about this World War III possibility. I mean, is all of this leading to that?
Absolutely. I've always been adamant that it would start in the South Asia Pacific, Southeast China Sea for the most part. And because that is an area that area is very highly contested because of China being isolated for so long. No more. They're coming out. They're saying this is our territory. We're going to recapture it, and building those man-made islands in the area, antagonizing and bringing in other countries in Southeast Asia under their regime and control. So through economic means and also through other means as well. I mean, so this is a very serious time for us in Asia. It's a very serious time for us in this part of the world, and we have to take it serious.
So, Eric, what kind of conversations do you think went on between the White House and Speaker Pelosi? Why now? Why would she go now?
Well, of course, her visit wasn't something that they just did, right?
Right.
It was a calculated move to show strength of the United States, of what China has been doing. So, for the most part, that's where they are. And China is retaliating by, showing that their strength. So, we're in a situation now, where, we're going to have to make a determination on what type of military intervention we're going to have. in that area. We're going to move more aircraft carriers in that area. We're going to bolster our partners in Japan and others in the area, in Guam and so forth. Of course, we have the naval base there. So we're really going to have to ask ourselves, what are we going to do? Now, this is going to come at the cost of basically allowing Ukraine to fight their own battle, of course, with U.S. and NATO military help and military from the United States, our military equipment, as opposed to soldiers on the ground, boots on the ground. So, it's between Russia, China, and of course, when we look at Iran and then, of course, Turkey in that area, we have three fronts that we're fighting. And then we can't forget about cyber war as well.
Yeah. So, Erica, when you get close, let me know because we will put some music on and let you walk into the studio. Okay?
Absolutely.
So just let us know when you're getting close. In the meantime, we also still have what happened with the leader of Al-Qaeda. We took him out this week with a drone strike. So should we be worried about retaliation from that front too?
We will always fight that battle. Always. It's a battle that we've been fighting for a very long time, and we'll just continue to do that. That battle is more of a battle of ideology. It's more of a battle of belief in principle as opposed to power. And you're not going to destroy that belief. You're just not going to do it. So that's a front that we're going to have to continue to keep our intelligence around, and we're going to have to continue to ensure that we're ahead of the curve. But insurgents are being created every day because they're being indoctrinated. So that's something that we're going to continue to fight.
So, taking this gentleman out, Zawahiri, taking him out does not end the Taliban and does not end what is going on in that part of the world.
No, not at all. What it does is just simply shifts control. Now, of course, there are anytime you lose a top general or strategist, you lose some continuity, right? With anything, whether it's a sprawling military or whether it's just a small band of individuals. But what it does, it gives individuals an opportunity to come back and coalesce around another leader around the same principle. So it'll be a little longer before something major is devised. Now, whether it happens or not, because keep in mind, our intelligence thwarts a lot of military attacks, a lot of things that could happen.
Those are things we don't hear about.
We do not hear about it, but every day, not just on the ground, but also in cyber. And I keep talking about cyber because, when we talk about bolstering our military, we really have lacked in bolstering our infrastructure, our cyber infrastructure. And, of course, we're not as vulnerable as most nations, but being the superpower, we are vulnerable. And that's something that we're going to have to continue to drive and ensure that we keep bolstering on every front.
So do you think that cyber would be more of an issue than the actual physical fighting? I mean, in other words, could our next world war, if you will, might be fought more on the cyber front as opposed to boots on the ground?
Well, actually, I think both. Of course, we're not going to have as many boots on the ground, but I think both. Why do I say that? Because it's easier to send a virus through our computer streams. Barbara, we do everything through computers. We do everything cellular. We don't have a lot of solid wired infrastructure. I'm speaking on the cellular phone now. If a tower goes out, if something hits a satellite in space, what happens to it? If our power grid, goes out, and blanks the entire Northeast corridor. If our water system, the water grid goes down, is our water safe to drink? How long would it take to get back online? Our nuclear system, our nuclear power system, and our nuclear weapon system, if that goes offline, how vulnerable are we there? So it's very easy. And let's not forget financial, okay? We can send right now one cyber attack through our financial system, throughout the world can send shockwaves shockwaves and cause disruption. So to your point, I think it's going to be multifaceted. But again, I think at the end of the day, cyber is the quickest way, and it's going to be followed up with some hardware, with missile strikes. So keep that in mind.
So, Eric, I've heard people say, well, if we could take out Zaharwari with a drone, why were we spending all those years in Afghanistan? Well, that was a wasted war in essence. I'm curious about your response.
Well, one thing that war is, and I've talked about this before, war is very profitable. So, it's a very profitable industry. So there you go.
He said, so there you go. All right. Well, let's bring it on home to the domestic front because we got a lot of stuff going on here in the United States also. First, let me give out the phone numbers, 757-440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240. What are you thinking about in terms of, as you look at our political landscape and all the things that are happening? What questions do you have for our political analyst, Dr. Eric Claville? 757-440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240. So Kansas voters showed up in record numbers to keep abortion rights as a part of their state constitution. Do you think, Eric, this is just the beginning of the backlash of what the Supreme Court did in overturning Roe v. Wade, or is Kansas an outlier?
No, it's definitely the start. This is, whether you agree, with abortion rights or not, this is something that's really been a part of our culture for, constitutionally protected for the last half century. And to, take it away with a decision, a quick decision by the U.S. Supreme Court, which actually provided it, the U.S. Supreme Court provided the protection, you're basically disrupting, the whole equilibrium of how these issues play out. So we're going to see more and more states move toward, their plan, because what the Supreme Court said, give it to the states, right? So you're going to see more and more voters go to the polls to vote, and you're going to see more state constitutional amendments, either protecting or limiting, whatever the case may be. You're going to see state legislators, depending on their voters, that are going to either limit or expand or protect. So at the end of the day, I believe that what's going to happen is that you're going to see all these different laws that are out there, and you're only going to need like one or two, issues that create a very dangerous health-wise situation. Lord forbid someone actually dies, but, you'll see something like that, and it's going to go back to the Supreme Court. And what I believe is going to happen, you're going to get the law that we've had the last past century come back into effect.
So were you surprised, because Kansas is a red state, that the women, because it was predominantly a women's vote that turned things around? Was that a surprise to you?
No, not at all. Because at the end of the day, whether you agree or not, women have lived with this ability to determine, things with their body and when to give birth, when not to give birth. It's been said that, the most powerful weapon that came out of the women's movement was the birth control pill, right? Because at that moment, women had the opportunity to control, when they were able to give birth with their bodies. So to take that away, again, all women are saying, wait a minute, this is my right, and I want to do everything I can to protect it. So, no, I don't see that as being surprising.
But Governor Youngkin says in Virginia he would like to see the laws changed to 15 weeks or prohibiting abortion after 15 weeks. Do you think that would happen? Would that fly in Virginia?
Again, it depends on the legislature, but right now I don't really foresee it happening. Of course, he has to say that because of who he is and also his base. But at the end of the day, I think what you'll see is what we've always had here in the Commonwealth, and also in a lot of states. To be very honest with you, Barbara.
Okay, 440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240. Andrea joins us from Virginia Beach. Hi, Andrea. You're on the air.
Hi, Miss Lee. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, you're very welcome.
Hey, so my question to our distinguished guest is this, and it's going to kind of sound like a conspiracy theory, but it's an idea, and I was kind of wondering if he believes that based on Trump and Putin's relationship, if maybe there was some sort of an agreement struck whereby if Trump lost the last election, that Putin would then invade Ukraine, which would cause widespread economic issues to make the current administration look weak.
Wow. Okay. Let's get a response from Eric. Eric, did you hear that?
Yeah, I did. And actually is not too far, nothing's too far-fetched,
Wow.
with that administration. But, I can't speak to that because I don't know the inner workings or the agreements that took place, if any did. But what I can do is talk about it and bring back to everyone's remembrance, under the Trump administration, the military aid that was withheld from Ukraine under the Trump administration. That allowed Russia to gain a strategic advantage over Ukraine. So keep in mind, that aid was withheld for almost 2 years, I believe. So that allowed Russia to, bolster their forces on the border, build up forces where they currently have military on the borders and really in the territory of Ukraine that they've annexed. So, no, it's not far-fetched, but at the same time, I can't speak to that. But what we do know is that aid was withheld, and it really caused a problem with Ukraine defending themselves against Russia.
440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240 are the numbers to call to join our conversation. We're talking about world politics and domestic politics here on Another View today. How close are you, Eric? Any closer?
Yeah, about 5 minutes away.
5 minutes away. Okay, there you go. So when we were talking about the elections this week and so forth in Arizona, a lot of the Trump-backed candidates won their primaries, including the gentleman who could become in charge of elections in Arizona. We know that Arizona became that big battleground state in terms of the Trump administration, former President Trump claiming that the election was stolen. Your response to what's going on there?
It's still, the Republican Party is still the party of Trump. And you have, now it's not the majority as over 50% plus one, 50% plus one across the board, but in a lot of key states, it is a majority in a lot of districts, which is why you do see, Barbara, a lot of Republicans losing their primary, especially those that voted to impeach the former president. So it's not surprising to see it. It is one thing that the Republican Party is going to have to deal with. But I do believe we're looking at a reshaping of the two parties. Right now, we see where in the polls just released, the majority of Americans believe that the worst thing that can happen is either current President Biden or former President Trump be reelected as president. We do see that both parties have acquiesced to the extremes of their ideology. However, and most people are in the middle. I'll just say that. But most parties have acquiesced to the extreme dogma and ideology of their parties, which is causing a lot of rifts, in the political process of getting things done the way that normally things get done. And that's through negotiation, right? I mean, you have your stump speech, but at the end of the day, just like, the senators, they go in the back room and they start talking, they start negotiating. And that's how you get things done in politics. But right now, there is a persons of disillusion, over the political process and the extremes of both sides, utilizing that as their primary platform.
So, Eric, where will the independents land, do you think? I mean, because on both sides, Democrats and Republicans, you're right. There's such extremes, and those who are independent, I'm curious as to where you think which direction are they going in at this point?
Well, you have, of course, you have individuals who are loyal to their party, regardless.
Mm-hmm.
However, you do have a third party that has started by former candidate Yang, and I forget the other candidate on the Republican side, a female candidate that ran for president. But these individuals have started a third party. Now, of course, there's no platform as of yet. So you see individuals that are seeking, but we also know, Barbara, that third parties have had a hard time in the United States really taking hold, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we're a solid two-party system. So I believe that your independents will either do one or three things. They're either going to vote their party affiliation and really voice that they change. Secondly, they're going to vote this independent party or third party. Or lastly, they're just going to stay at home.
Mm. And that's going to be problematic. If you're just joining us, we're talking about politics and world affairs with Dr. Eric Claville, political analyst and creator of the award-winning Claville Report. 757-440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240 are the numbers to call. Ernest joins us from Suffolk. Hi, Ernest. You're in the air.
Yes. Thank you for taking my call.
You're welcome.
Thank you. So, and we was talking about the Brittany Griner sentencing, but I have not heard any of the WNBA players voice any true solidarity about boycotting playing for those Russian teams that most of them play for and then all season. If that was to happen, that would be a true statement of solidarity. So not taking an answer off the air.
Okay, thank you, Ernest. So Ernest is saying that, while they've been showing support here in the United States, nobody has said we're not going back over there to play.
Right. Yeah, this actually is that's a very good point that caller makes. And this blurs the line of economics and diplomacy and corporate, right? Mm. So what I mean by that, there were players that wanted to speak out, but they were actually told to, not speak out. We're waiting on the White House because of the diplomatic issues. And then also, and that was on the WNBA corporate side. Mm-hmm. But then also keep in mind that a lot of WNBA players, they play overseas off season because they don't make enough money here in the United States under their league. So now you have this very tangled web of one player, even though she's a star player, but at the same time, is that player enough to really disrupt what our country is doing diplomatically across the board with Russia, our involvement with them? And then lastly, are players in WNBA powerful enough to upend and disrupt what the WNBA heads and the corporate say not to say or to say? In other words, do we have, Barbara, do we have Bill Russells that exist today, really?
Yeah.
And now we know in the NBA we do have LeBron James who's taken a monumental stance, and of course Chris Paul and others, but really LeBron James with the most to lose. And he's taking stands, and we see that, his calculated stands have really been very admirable, but at the same time, it's shown the spirit of Bill Russell. But he's a different star, different type of star. Mm-hmm. So we also see the gender lines as well.
So there's a lot going on there. 757-440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240. What other questions do you have about what is happening in our world politically at this time? Give us a call, 757-440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240. So, Eric, what do you think are going to be the major issues that drive people to the polls for the midterms? I mean, because we've got the economy, we got recession, we have Roe v. Wade. I mean, are any of these going to be the driving force behind getting people to go to the polls for the midterms? And do you think it will disrupt the balance of power for going forward?
Well, in the words of the Raging Cajun, it's all about the economy, stupid. So, I mean, that's where you are. You know, the economy. You have issues that are going to exist domestically, but more specifically internationally. So, I believe that's where your major areas are.
Okay, and so in terms of whether or not. I guess my question is, what are we looking for to happen in November? What do you think is going to be the outcome?
In November, I think we're going to have definitely a new candidate and definitely a new person that's going to represent us in our country and also across the world. So
you're talking about the presidential election?
Yeah. Are you speaking of 2022?
Yeah, I'm talking about 2024. Oh. I mean, I'm sorry, 2022 right now for the midterms.
Yeah, 2022, I think we're going to find where the House actually may flip, and I think the Senate is actually still in play. So I think you're looking at some very interesting issues, and I want to address those more as we take our quick commercial break as I stand outside your door.
Okay, that sounds really good. We will be right back. We're ready. Okay, welcome back. It's good to see your face, Dr. Claville.
It's definitely good to be in the house, and I hope everybody's good on the interstate.
You didn't run people over, did you?
No comment.
Okay, so you said the House is going to flip.
I believe it is. Right now, there are a lot of vulnerable districts out there that are in play. We have actually two that are in play here. In Virginia, one where we are with Elaine Luria, the district that she represents out of Virginia Beach, and then also Spanberg out of Northern Virginia. I think those two are the most vulnerable ones, and it really depends on turnout. But historically, in midterm elections, what ends up happening is that the party not in power in the White House usually flips the House during midterms. So I think that's what we're going to see. Also, I mean, even though it wasn't created by this administration, this administration was handed a terrible economy. It was handed a pandemic that was handled terribly. It was handled an international policy that we see played out that we talked about earlier. And basically, this administration is suffering because of it, and everybody falls down from the top. But I do fault them by not really addressing and articulating that more so to the people better.
So, and we're going to talk about President Biden and former President Trump in just a minute, but let's go to the phones. Daryl joins us from Newport News. Hi, Daryl. You're on the air.
Good afternoon. I always enjoy the program.
Thank you.
I have to disagree. The guest equated the Republican Party as embracing the far right as much as the Democrats embrace the far left. In my opinion, that's far from the truth. Kennedy, Carter, Clinton were more Republican than Obama and Biden have been. These guys were physical conservatives, deficit hawks, deregulation. They weren't into quotas. The left is going defund go down the list. Defund the police, pronouns, fossil fuels, all this. I'm the average conservative. I don't think the far right has an influence on the Republican Party. Just define the far right for me, and how many are there?
Okay, Daryl, thanks for the call. I'll let you respond, Eric.
Sure. I'll define the far right in one word: J6. Right, the January 6th commission that is going on now. What we saw happen in our country on January 6th was an embarrassment. Absolute embarrassment. Should have never taken place. It was despicable. It was absolutely a shot, a terrible shot at our democracy. And it was hands down led by the Republican president, who basically tailored to the extreme of the Republican Party. And all the Republicans in office at that time, outside of the 10 that voted to impeach the president, still none of them stood up against that. Well, you had a president of the Republican Party of the extreme right that embraced that called for the taking out of his own vice president. I mean,
so speaking of January 6th, do you think that are people paying attention to, because the testimony, if you've been watching, it's been riveting. And for me, it still is just astounding to me that all of us watched this happen in real time. Yeah. But yet a year and a half later, we're still trying to figure out if it happened.
Right.
So,
no, we're not trying to figure out if it happened or not. Keep in mind that immediately after it took place, immediately after the halls of Congress were cleared and desecrated, the halls of Congress were desecrated, period. You had some Republicans saying, "Oh, that was BLM. They were all infiltrating or whatever group they were utilizing at that time to try to spin it." You have Republicans out of Wisconsin Ron Johnson trying to spin it still to this day. Fox News have never really covered it the way that it should have been covered, with telling the truth. So it took place. It definitely took place. And as the caller stated, he mentioned the extremes of the left, and those are some of the extremes that he discussed. But all those presidents he mentioned, even Obama and Biden, they're all center. They're all center presidents. But when you take a look at J6, is it going to make a difference? Historically, it will. Currently, it won't, because the story is being told differently on both sides, and that's the problem. Here's the difference, Barbara. Nixon and Watergate was told the same on all sides. Matter of fact, it was this Goldwater went to him when Nick in the White House in Oval Office. Nixon asked him, "How much support do we have?" He said, "Mr. President, you have no support. It's time to resign." That was his own party. Nobody of the Republican Party said that to their president. They were afraid to do it. They had no courage. They were cowards, and they did not do that at all.
So if Trump decides to formally announce that he's going to run in 2024 now, would that impact the 2022, the midterms at all?
It will, but he won't do it because right now the RNC is actually paying his legal bills. So he's not going to do it.
Oh, so you don't think he's going to announce?
No.
Really?
Unless he wants to carry that cost. They're going to pay his legal bills all the way throughout. And he's got not just if the attorney general charges him or not. I think he has to, because why go through this exercise if you're not going to do it? Mm-hmm. I think he has to after 2 failed impeachment hearings. But at the end of the day, he's also got Georgia, and he's going to have to deal with Georgia as well, which has a lot more evidence.
Yeah, absolutely. Mark joins us from Norfolk. Hi, Mark. You're on the air.
Yeah, good afternoon. How you doing, Dr. Claville?
Hey, good to see you, Mark.
Yeah, look, I'm a true independent at heart, through and through. I'm a Ross Perot voter back in 1992. Mm-hmm. And I think part of the problem with the third-party issue is that the media does a super-duper job with this pundit in killing the thought of it. In other words, you have experts that may be talking for 30 minutes, hours at a time, talking about mathematically how it cannot happen. And I think what happens when people talk to people like me about you're wasting your vote, I think it paralyzes that possibility. And by holding that possibility back, I don't think our quote-unquote democracy is going to get any better anytime soon.
Your response?
Yeah. Again, as a third-party system, historically we have not had that really since only in the beginning of the country. Of course, you had the Whigs and so forth, but really it's not something that we historically have had.
So at any other time in history, since you are a student of history too, have we had this kind of division in terms of the parties. Daryl, who we just talked to before Mark, called back and he said that January 6th was not a big deal. He mentioned the Clinton scandal, and he also said the vaccine was a hoax. So I'm just curious as to whether or not, that type of division, it seems like there are people who, no matter what the facts are presented, they're going to stick with their side of the story.
Right. And you're exactly right. I mean, that's exactly what's going to happen. And they've been doing that. And but to your point, Barbara, I don't think we have seen that in this day and time. I think this is the most extreme. I think in I say modern time, if we take a look at the 50s and the 60s, it was a different environment. We had it. Keep in mind, we had extremes of our country. I mean, our country was basically we tore our country up, over the issue of rights of Black people. I mean, people forget that, right? We fought a war for 4 years, killed more Americans, brothers against brothers, cousins against cousins, in that war, to create an equal playing field for everyone. So, we did that. We did that, and we're still fighting telling the full story of that as well. We're still fighting that. Also in the 50s and the 60s, we were divided because of that same issue under Jim Crow. But when you take a look at modern history, this is the most divided that we've been from an ideological standpoint. The question is, Barbara, will it roll over into the streets like it did in the 60s? Will it roll over into our countries? Into our states, with regions fighting different regions like it did during the 1860s.
And that's the scary part. Richard joins us from Norfolk. Hi, Richard. You're on the air.
How are you this afternoon?
Doing good.
I should say just about afternoon anyway, huh? Thank you for taking my call. I do enjoy your show, and I wish I could get into some of these other issues here and there, but I'm going back to Brittany Griner, which I turned your show on this morning and started listening to.
Okay.
And I just had to make a couple of comments. I wanted to make a couple of comments. So I really would like to see her get out of jail. I feel sorry for her. When they're trading, I don't remember the guy's name, the bad guy for Brittany and this other newspaper reporter that are innocent people. And that's all a political issue. But people, I don't know if the people that sponsored the basketball players, she included, if they told them ahead of time what they should or should not do when they go into another country, Russia or any other country for that matter, because the other countries do not treat you like they do in the United States by any means. A lot of different rules and regulations. So I was so if they didn't, and hopefully she will get out before her 9-year time, but if she does, I'd come back over here and sue her organization if they didn't tell her anything. Not just a suit, but it would open things up for the news to have other people aware of what goes on in other countries. A lot of Americans do not know, and they just treat it like America when they go somewhere. And that's not just Russia. That's in a lot of other places.
Gotcha. All right, let me let Eric respond to that. Thanks for the call, Richard.
Richard, I thank you for your question, but I kind of push that to personal responsibility in part. You have to know, the laws when you go into other countries. That's in part on you. We do have embassies where you can ask those questions. And this is somewhere that this particular person this is not foreign to them. They've been there, they've played there. So, if her defense is her defense, their laws are their laws. But we have this issue that's happening between Russia and the United States. That's the underlining issue. So it's not so much her. It's not so much her. But this is really a slap on the wrist type situation. Just to be very honest with you,
I'm sure she doesn't feel that way, but I hear what you're saying, right, in terms of diplomatic relations.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, even the offense she's charged with is really a slap on the wrist. It should have always been, but they've escalated to a different level. So yeah.
So what are you looking for in terms of where we're going politically now? What do we need to be paying attention to?
Barbara, I think in part we really have to take a look and pay attention to what's really happening in our economy. Right now, coming out before the pandemic, and keep in mind, the pandemic really helped to cover up a lot of issues that we've had. Just to be very honest with you. A lot of a lot of organizations were at the cusp of bankruptcy or closing or cutting staff. CARES Act saved a lot of people, especially in higher education. The various loans that turned into grants by paying employees saved a lot of companies. But it also gave an opportunity for a lot of people. It saved a lot of people, too, with the stimulus that was provided. They were able to stay in their homes, pay off debt, and things of that nature. But those things are ramping back up. And with inflation costs, stimulus going away, no more CARES Act money. The last bit is being spent this fiscal year. And so with that, you're going to see a lot of issues that's going to take place where people have with money in the economy. Now, keep in mind, we have a deficit of workers, a shortage of workers for jobs. I mean, you can go down to a gas station, that it's really, some people say it's a big candy store that sells gas. But you go to one of those and make $15-20 an hour, and they're giving you a bonus of $500,000 just to come to work.
Not quite 500,000, but I got you.
No, right, $500 to $1,000.
To $1,000, yes.
to sign up for a job. So there are jobs out there, and skilled jobs, skilled labor, especially in cyber, and skilled workers that are there. But right now, the question is, can we get the society to switch over from being service provided society to go back to be work service, right? But we're going to have to deal with immigration. We're going to have to open the doors again to allow skilled workers to come in. And then that's going to create, in the next generation, that's going to create what we call foreign investment and foreign-born workers that are going to be the new drivers of the economy. And we know with economics, it drives, it really drives a lot of things, everything in America. And then lastly, we're going to have to take a look, Barbara, at how do we deal with communities, public safety, and our public safety officers. Black Lives Matter movement highlighted a lot of issues in law enforcement, but now we also see the issues associated with our communities taking a forefront, and we see a rise in crime. So how do we now deal with those two issues, but at the same time reach the agreement that we want safe communities, but we also want our citizens and law enforcement to respect each other?
Yeah. Let's go to Rebecca in Gloucester. Hi, Rebecca, you're in the air.
Yes. I have a question about the Social Security, the Secret Service and the loss of tapes from the 6th January, and the fact that the Department of Homeland Security, their involvement, and it just seems like there's still Trump supporters that were hiding information, and I thought it was supposed to be like a bipartisan position when you're in the Secret Service, and I wondered what your opinion was about that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Rebecca.
Yeah, but again, the heads of these departments are political appointees. You have civil service career workers that are service that are keyed in, and they operate by the rule book. But at the end of the day, you have political appointees that run those departments.
Okay, let's see if we can get one more call in. Elena joins us from Norfolk. Hi, Elena, you're on the air. Elena, are you there? Okay, I guess she's not there. So, but the bottom line is, Elena? No, it's not working for some reason. So the bottom line, though, is regardless of which side you fall on, we still need to vote. Is that right?
Absolutely. Now, feel the way you want to feel. But at the end of the day, if you don't vote, that's your voice, right? You're muting your voice. Make sure that your voice matters. Make sure that your voice counts. And in order to do that, you got to get out there. You got to vote. You got to advocate for your side and your issues. Because at the end of the day, I want to make sure, and I tend to say this, I try to say this a lot, what we have in this American experiment is a very special thing. People come from all over the world. They leave their origin of birth, and most have never return, to come here to build, quote unquote, a better life because of what we have. I want that to sink in for a moment, as you continue to listen to what I have to say, because if we destroy what we have, what is the next? What's the next best thing outside of America, outside of American democracy? Think about that, because that's what you're going to have to deal with. That's what you're going to have if we destroy our institutions that protect the freedoms of choice that we have in this country. So at the end of the day, Barbara, it's one of those things where, we're going through a problem. We're still a young country, right? And we have countries in the Middle East that have existed for centuries. We've only been around not even half a millennial, right? But we are at a very important moment in our country and really in our world where we can make an indelible impression on the future for good, or we can screw it up.
So if President Biden does not run for next term, who do you think will step in?
That's a very hard question. I've actually looked at the slate, and right now, I think you're going to have to look at a senator that may come. I'm sorry, a governor from a state that's going to have to come up. I know a person looking at Gavin Newsom. I know the governor of Michigan individuals are looking at as well. But I just don't think this administration. Now, I think he wants to run for a reelection. I think and he'll buck the system if at the end of the day. But keep in mind, President Biden kind of won by default, if you really think about it.
What do you mean?
Well, he ran for president a couple of times.
Yeah.
And didn't even get double-digit percentage. And if it wasn't for Claville, the kingmaker out of South Carolina, that basically gave him the right hand of approval, he was dead in the water. Right? And, at the time, anybody could have beaten President Trump, but anybody was not beating him. In other words, with all the chaos, daily chaos we had for 5 years under the former president, daily chaos, the Democrats still could not create a candidate or a message to override what he was doing.
Overwhelmingly.
Override, right? So, and keep in mind, President Biden didn't win by that much. You really had to have an overachieving turnout in Philadelphia, overachieving turnout in a couple other areas for him to really win. So
I'm curious, you didn't say Kamala Harris.
No, I mean, again, she ran for president as well and didn't fare well. Also, her organizations that she's run in campaigns have faltered, and they've had some major issues. Also, currently in the role of vice president, I think that President Biden did a disservice by giving her certain things, and I think also they wanted to put her out there too fast to show that she was a leader in certain policy areas that were very challenging and that you weren't going to get a resolution over, such as the border issue with migrants coming in and so forth. I mean, it's just been a rollout of disaster for her. So I think sitting back, regrouping is a good thing. She has some new staff that's in as well. But I just don't think that she has the support across the board to really run. And plus, you also have to look at the issue of race and gender and whose time. Right now, white women believe it's their time, right? So you're gonna get a big push in the Democratic Party and pressure to put a white female up that is electable in order to be the next president.
Eric, we are out of time.
Wow.
Thank you so very, very much. And I'm glad you made it through traffic.
Absolutely.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And thank you, audience, for spending part of your Thursday afternoon with us. If you'd like to hear this show again or share it with a friend, please visit our website, anotherviewradio.org, and download the podcast. And be sure to sign up for our eView newsletter. It's a once-a-week reminder of upcoming shows. Next week on Another View, current events with the Another View Roundtable. Our theme music is an original composition created especially for Another View by Jay Sennett. Special thanks to producer Paul Bibbo for filling in for show producer Lisa Godley. Todd Washburn is our audio engineer. I'm Barbara Ham Lee. Have a great weekend, everyone, and let's get together again next Thursday at noon for Another View.
Support comes from Thomas Nelson Community College, now becoming Virginia Peninsula Community College, the first choice to start a career. Gain skills in fields like cybersecurity and education. More at tncc.edu.
Support comes from Hampton Roads Community Foundation, carrying out your charitable wishes forever, whether it's helping shelter animals, feeding the homeless, enhancing the arts, or supporting students. Learn more at leaveabequest.org.